is my baby.
I'm Dana Denha.
And I'm Melissa Bondi, and this is Adventures in Parenthood, where we take a ride on the roller coaster that we call parenting.
We are our children's first educators. We teach them language and play, and we also teach them how to love, respect, and treat others, as well as how to cope during challenging times. We don't always know if we're doing the right thing, but there are resources available to help us navigate through these difficult discussions. We will be speaking with someone specialized in communicating with our young ones shortly. But first, Melissa, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, I've had to have difficult conversations with Keaton before. And regarding, like I said, death, have you had to have any of these sort of conversations with Bryn yet? They're around the same age, and I think they start thinking about things like this around the same time.
It's definitely has come up in recent months. Yes. So it was a little awkward for me. It wasn't personal, but it might have been some things she saw actually, I think in a movie recently that dealt with death, but it was still a kid's movie. And it was, I needed a way to console her. She wasn't, it did get to the point where there were tears on her end, and I did find it very, very difficult to talk about it. And she had it in her mind that she doesn't want to get to age 100 and die. And I don't want to say, oh, that's not true, but it was just it's so difficult, Dana, for sure, to talk about it.
Our next guest is an author that talks about all kinds of stuff. I mean, he talks about gender identity, he talks about social anxiety, and he talks about it in a way that kids can relate to, but he also talks about it in a way that parents can enjoy, and I think it's a way that makes our own words come out in a more eloquent way. It's
Right.
what our own thoughts might be, but we can't quite think of the words to tell our kids when they're so young to understand such heavy things. So I'd like to welcome our next guest, local author. He's a children's book author and a YA author, Jordan J. Scavone.
Hi, Jordan. Welcome to Adventures in Parenthood. It's so nice to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I've heard a lot about you. I heard you've got some wonderful books. I was able to read one of them today. So Dana and I were just talking about some pretty heavy topics when it comes to our kids and talking about it. So real briefly, though, can you tell us just how you got started or how you became this local author with 4 amazing books?
So I had originally written my first children's book as a child. My dad kept it, and it's all stapled together and stencil drawn, and it's absolutely dreadful. A classroom of second graders have told me that it's dreadful. So and they would know. They would know. But I went to college at Eastern Michigan originally for communication and theater, and the theater program and I didn't click well. And then during my freshman year, I took a diversity general education credit, and it was multicultural children's lit. And so that was my first real exposure to children's lit at a higher level. And I was like, ooh, this is really interesting. And then there was more children's lit courses, so I kept taking more children's lit courses, and eventually I realized, I can actually get a degree in this. So I dropped the theater degree. I kept the comm degree, but I added in the children's lit as well.
Okay.
Well, I think that was the right choice for you, because I was telling Melissa before the show, we have a lot of authors come on the show, but there's something about your words that really resonate with me when I'm trying to talk to my daughter about things. So I told you earlier, we were reading the book and you warned me, you might cry when you read your books, or it talks about things that you wouldn't expect children's books to talk about.
Right.
And I
Hmm.
think that's what really sets you apart, because you're talking about it in a way that children can understand. And can you tell me how you can put yourself in that place to get
Right.
there, to be able to say those words that we as parents really can feel, but also our kids can really understand it?
Um, a lot of it is that I also, so when I'm not writing, I teach full time at a child care center in Ann Arbor. So I get to
Mm.
spend literally, 40 plus hours a week interacting and talking with uh, infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. So I get used to communicating on their level and doing that things. But I also, when I talk to kids, I talk to them as I talk to adults for the most part. I mean,
Okay.
certain words are going to get left out, but um, so I go into it with the mindset that this is like I don't want to not sugarcoat it necessarily, but I don't want to,
Right.
make it seem. I want it to feel real, and I want it to have that emotion behind it. I never intended to write now 3 children's books in a row that makes adults cry.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, it just kind of happened that way, and it's been what's been really nice is that it's the adults feeling the emotion, but I've also had kids that are feeling the emotion as well. My sister-in-law messaged me after the new book came out, and I was like, "Oh, how was it?" And she was like, "It was really good, and actually, it really helped one of my nieces." Who, because of all the stuff in the world, has been very concerned about the concept of death for the first time in her life.
Mm.
And she was like, my sister-in-law told me that just one read through of it like put a lot into perspective, and it really helped her.
Sure.
Do you find becoming a father yourself has changed your writing at all?
I don't know yet. I have not done much writing since he's been here.
Yeah, it does take up a
Um,
lot of time. He's really little still, so.
Ah.
yeah, so he's 7 months. He'll be 8 months at the start of the month, start of February. And the new book's manuscript essentially was finished. I wanted to finish it before he got here
Mm.
because I knew it would be hard to get it done once he was here. So I've mostly, if I've done any writing lately, it's been kind of more outlining concepts or dabbling with ideas and getting that down. So
Mm.
I don't know yet. Um, I don't think so. The only
I
thing
could
is that
see
like
him being
he,
sort of a muse down the road for you, giving you
yeah,
ideas of things to do, because I think, you're
Sure.
around a lot of kids, but it's different when you're around the same kid all the time.
yeah, and that's kind of where I was going. A lot of my books like have inspiration from the kids that my at my center. My
Mm.
first 2 books were directly inspired by 2 girls who were in my classroom. Turtle Day, my fourth one was as well, and so 2 of them they're in my author photos with me.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, so like I try to pull from real life things that I know people are experiencing, and I didn't intend to have a book about death come out during a global pandemic.
oh,
um, but I also, it's not, it really has nothing to do with the pandemic aside from the fact that death is on people's minds.
I mean, death is a real thing that we all deal with in our lives, and some of us have to deal with it at a lot younger age than others. So
mhm.
I think it's really smart to be talking about the things you're talking about with kids, because there is such a small niche for these things where, like, I needed a book about death, and there weren't many to choose from. And
Hmm.
I would have loved to have had this book to read to my daughter when she needed to understand it. So I think it's great that you're thinking about different things that kids do ask questions about. They're asking these questions, but there's not necessarily always the resources there to that they would really understand.
So my third book, um, which is A Girl Named Adam, is my book looking at transgender awareness.
Mm.
And I've had parents specifically say, some of our friends are starting to transition and it's confusing our
Mm.
kids because,
Mm.
they're younger. And they have used that book to be like, this is what's happening to your now aunt or your now uncle or et cetera, et
Mm.
cetera. And one of my friends from high school specifically, like one of her best friends was transitioning, and it was really confusing. Their daughter, who has known this person for I think her daughter's 8 or 9, so her whole life, but 8-9 years, and she couldn't find like the words to explain to her daughter, that it's the same person, but they're changing. And she said they read the book once, and her daughter was like, "Oh, that's like, I don't insert name," and
Yeah.
then their daughter got it.
Well, there was something I actually wanted to know about that book specifically, because I think
Yes.
it is such a sensitive subject, and you are not transgender. So how did you
No.
sort of want to broach this, as, because you're taking it from the viewpoint of the friend, right? It's the friend
Mhm.
is sort of confused about the whole process of it. And did you take it from that stance because you understood that stance better?
Yes. So one of my best friends is transgender.
Mm.
And when we met, she did not openly identify. She had not started transitioning for, I want to say, almost a year. So, I had gotten to know this person really well. She was one of our neighbors' best friends, so we saw her all the time. And when she started to transition, my wife and I didn't have any issues with it, but personal issues. We had there were moments where our pronouns would slip, and
Which is
our
normal. It
nouns would
happens to a
slip.
lot of, it happens to all of us actually, when we don't know the person, like when we know them pre and post transition.
Exactly. And I was talking to her, and I was like, "Hey, I have this idea for a book, and it's loosely, how we interacted." We had a moment where I had to I talked to her, and I was like, "Hey, we are not messing up on purpose. Like, we're not, trying to make you mad or alienate you. We're learning and experiencing this with you." And
Right.
I wanted to capture that, but obviously not from the perspective of a then 27-year-old to then of an elementary age. And I thought about how an elementary girl would take her best friend, you know, transitioning, and it turned into, oh, she's stealing my spotlight. She looks better in this outfit than I did. And
Mm.
she doesn't care that it's happening. She's upset that, on a much more superficial level, the way a kid would be. And then at the end, she finally realizes she's confused, and she wants to know what's going on.
Mm.
And so that's my first makes adults cry book.
I was gonna say, I was dealing recently with so my question is, what age would you recommend to start read your books? Would you recommend to start reading this, to the kids? Because I'm just starting off with, I was gonna paint my nephew's fingernails, and he's a boy. And my daughter was like, "You can't paint those. He's a boy." And I quickly had to, I made sure, yes, you can. You can paint a boy's, fingernails. And so we're starting there. So that's kind of where I am with the 5-year-old is, letting her know that boys can get ears, their ears pierced. And so I think that as a parent, that's the first thing that comes to mind. It's the first thing I say is, yeah, sure they can. Yes, they can. And this is why. So do you have what is your recommendations to, for parents or guardians who are starting off with those type of questions for their toddlers?
I just think it's really important, for me, gender normativity has never been a thing.
Hmm.
And I kind of didn't realize it when I was younger. And I think it's just because my mom and my stepdad specifically, they had several gay friends. So I was like,
Hmm.
I understood, from 6 that, oh, Dave has a husband. That's just how Dave has a husband. Cool. So for me, it was never like a thing. And I really kind of embraced it more as I've gotten older. Um, Especially I work with kids, so I'm up and down and on the floor all day. I hate wearing jeans. I
Hmm.
wear leggings and tights and gym
Hmm.
shorts to work.
Sure.
And every so often we'll get new families, and like you could, like, the dads will kind of look and be like, "You have tights on," and I'm like, "Yeah, I have to lay on the ground for 8 hours a day and roll around and
Right.
try to be comfortable. It's not easy to do in jeans and that sort of stuff." And it's never an out loud thing, but it's a clear
Yeah.
visual thing. Um, and I feel like the sooner kids get used to that, and most of them, most of my toddlers, my 2-year-olds, will do dress up, and they're like, "Oh, I want to wear the big blue, puffy dress too because it's cool looking." Like, you don't have that when you're born. It's definitely in that preschool to early elementary age where you start to really develop those concepts of you know gender norms and that sort of stuff. Like, we bought Felix, my 7-month-old. I finally got him a decent unicorn shirt,
Hmm.
because so many unicorn shirts are just so aggressively girl.
Mm-mm.
And he's at that size where, like, people look at him and they're like, "He's a boy, he's a girl." And
Ah.
then you look at his clothes, especially, again, he has these long eyelashes. His eyelashes,
Mm.
like, everyone looks at his eyes and they're like, his eyelashes look like girl eyelashes because they're so long.
Hmm.
But I finally
Yeah.
found him, like, a unicorn shirt that he can wear, and it's like, I mean, it's pink and it has sparkles on it, but it doesn't, like, it's not like this girl loves unicorns or something. It just has a unicorn on it.
The other thing we found is my daughter loves the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I love it. She loves superheroes, male and female,
Everyone
and
should.
she loves the turtles. And we were able to find a pink Ninja Turtle water bottle. So most of that stuff comes in. It's going to come in blue or green or the more masculine colors. But it was pink, and
Mhm.
I love it. I love that she loves it and uses it, and I love that she likes the turtles. I don't think there should be a sex, appointed to that type of cartoons or characters.
We'll be back in exactly 60 seconds with more from local author Jordan Scavone. We're back with Jordan. Jordan, we were just talking about one of your recent books, but I'd actually like to talk just for a quick minute about you've now sort of parlayed into the world of young adults, right? And
My
so
big kid book.
yeah, big kid book. And so how did that come about? That had to have been so different for you to write a book like that.
Yeah, so this is Night Warrior. It is just under, or just over 75,000 words. So a lot bigger than my
Wow.
600 to 800 word children's books. And originally, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to do full length books.
Mm.
And I just could never, it was never manifesting properly. The amount of, like, 40,000 plus word, like, attempted manuscripts I have are numerous and not great. And I was just kind of, like, at the point where I'm like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to this point where I can string together this length of a story and that sort of stuff. But the kids' books really helped do that in their own way, because it showed me, like, I learned how to take a complete story and drop it down to 800, 600, however many words. And so I basically reverse approached it when I finally got around to doing the young adult novel. So I started from the scripts, So whereas most books are adapted to script form, I went from script to book. The characters are all there. Your main players kind of show up in that, but there's things that happen in that don't happen in the book, and there's things that happen in the book that don't happen in the show.
What is the age you recommend for this book, the audience?
My YA, it's I count it as PG-13 if you're looking
Okay.
at like movies. So 13 and up, and
Okay.
then if you have like an advanced reader,
Mm.
like I would probably have been reading this at like 10.
Okay.
There's I think there's no big swears. There might be a B word. I'm not 100% sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a minute since I read through it. There is nothing like graphic in terms of like romance.
Okay.
There's barely romance because I think I'm terrible at writing it.
Oh.
Most of the PG-13 rating would be for fantasy violence.
Okay.
Sword and shield, cuts and blood, and that sort of stuff.
Well, I'd
Okay.
like to move on because we only have about 5 minutes left, and I want to talk about your new book, which
That's what happens when I talk too
actually-
much.
Yeah, let's talk about the book that just came out, Mighty Amelia, and we actually get to meet an old character that we were introduced to a while ago
Yes.
from you.
Yeah, it's it's Emilia.
Oh, Emilia.
Oh, Amelia. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for pronouncing
So,
that properly for me.
no, it's fine. I wanted to stick with a diverse cast. So she is Emilia is Mexican American. So what's really fun about this is I never intended to do a sequel. I generally don't like, especially children's book sequels. I don't usually like them unless they're designed to be a series.
I don't think
And
of it
Mighty was
as a
never designed to
sequel,
be a
though.
series.
I will tell you this. When I read it, I didn't think of it as a sequel, more of a spin-off.
Yeah. So we went, my illustrator and I, who this is a different illustrator than the first book, which was again partially deliberate to make it stand apart from the original.
Yeah.
And so we actually modeled the title font like style off of the new Spider-Man video game, because it's not Peter Parker, it's Miles Morales, and the title of that is Spider-Man, and then underneath it in a different font and color is Miles Morales. So we kind of piggybacked off that concept, and we went a little bit more comic heavy with it. So there's a little bit more panels. I actually used a comic book font for the font, and yeah, so it's Emma comes back as she's still Mighty. We don't actually get to see her be Mighty other than on the cover and in this image. And she makes a friend named Emilia, and it follows Emma meeting Emilia's abuelo, her grandfather, and she finds out that he's sick and he doesn't have much time left, and ultimately, Emma has to pass on the mantle of Mighty to a new person.
Yeah, it definitely is a heavy subject matter, but it also is about love and friendship and being there for somebody. And I'm like tearing up thinking about being at.
And at the core of it, all of my books. Yeah.
Because it is. Really
I have had. I would say I have had majority of people who have like commented, and the book's only been out for 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh!
At the time of recording this, so it's still really new. It had hit #1 new release the day that it came out, which was super cool on Amazon. It was sitting next to Dave Pilkey, who is the Captain Underpants guy, competing for like #1 new release, and I'm like, oh how am I going to do this?
That's pretty awesome, Jordan.
But yeah, that felt. I screenshotted that.
Yeah, that's a big
but yeah, the amount of people who are like, who messaged me and were like, yeah, so I just cried throughout this book. And my coworker read it to our kids, and she was like, oh God, I don't know if I can finish this.
And I'll tell you the beautiful thing that happened when I was reading the book to my daughter, and we have dealt with death already. We've already dealt with death like over a year ago. So she understands it, but she doesn't feel those deep emotions connected to it. but I'm reading the book and I start tearing up, and she goes and grabs me Kleenexes and wipes my eyes for me, which is so
Nah.
precious. And I do think, even if you're not per se dealing with a tough subject like death or gender identity, I think we should be talking about these things maybe before they should be even be asking, because they're all parts of our lives. They're all real parts of
Mhm.
life that are happening in front of us. And for instance, like death obviously is something that's been happening forever and we've all had to deal with it. But I think gender identity can be hard for adults too, because it's something newer that we've started to see more often in our lives that wasn't as common when we were young. So seeing young kids sort of
Right.
transition and stuff is something that can be confusing to talk about as parents without having resources like your books.
Yeah, and I didn't, when I started writing, I didn't go, okay, how can I write a book to help kids get over their social anxiety going to school? How can I help, that young LGBTQ plus individual who doesn't understand themselves yet find themselves? How can I help, that kid get over the death of their grandparent? I didn't sit down to write those books. It just kind of happened,
Mm-hmm.
and I've just kind of steered into it. And honestly, I'm waiting for my first dud, but it feels like it hasn't happened yet.
Jordan, I'm waiting
And
for
I feel like
you.
I'm overdue, honestly.
No, I don't think you have a
No,
dud. I
I
honestly
don't.
don't think you have a dud in you. And I'm waiting for you to not have to have your full-time job and you can just be a full-time writer, because you are
Yeah,
that good and you should be a full-time writer. So I think that day is coming for
I
you, and I
appreciate
think
that.
it's well overdue for you. So if anyone wants to check out any of your books, where should they go? Amazon? You have a website?
Yeah, so my website is jordanjscavone.com. There's links throughout that gets you there. All of my books are on Amazon. I indie publish through Amazon, so that's the easiest way to get them. But you can request them from your local bookstores. So if you're in Ann Arbor, you can go to Nicola's, and it should show up in their system. And hopefully, once the world's better, I can start doing events again and do things
ah,
in person, because I had like Facebook memories come up the other day from a school visit where I had like 400 kids in an auditorium, and I'm like, yeah, I
ah,
miss doing that.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on Adventures in Parenthood, Jordan.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
If you have an idea for a parenting show topic or guest, talk to us on Twitter and Facebook at hashtag CTN Ann Arbor.
And for more on our programming and services at CTN, you can visit us at a2gov.org/CTN and visit youtube.com/CTN Ann Arbor to watch a full lineup. And remember to comment and like and share. Thanks for joining us on this adventure in parenthood.